button. And then I've already sent the link to Katarina and John this morning for the training from yesterday. So I'll get the recording for this training to them as soon as I can. And we'll take it from there. And there were 2 users that emailed me this morning regarding passwords to log on to their account. I emailed you both directly with that temporary password. Once you type that in, once you follow the instructions in the email and log in, you will be directed to a page to set up a new password for yourself. And if you haven't set up your security questions, it will direct you towards setting up your security questions like we reviewed yesterday. So make sure you follow those 2 steps when you get logged in. Feel free to reach out to me via the chat, privately through the chat, or email. I have my email up on one of my screens, so I'll be able to see it if you guys send an email through. Okay. As yesterday, please feel free to ask questions during the short content that I'll go through, and then I'm available to jump into breakout rooms to answer questions once we break up into our breakout rooms. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Let me just pause my screen share for a second. Move some things around. And you should be able to see a different view of my screen now with the ACE website pulled up. Okay, so like yesterday, we are going to log on to the ACE. We're going to go to aceapp.org, and then we are going to type in our email address, type in our password, and click the login button. And oh, bear with me. Cleared my cache yesterday, guys. That's why it's doing some wacky stuff. Bear with me. There we go. Okay, so we're going to log in. This time, we are going to go into the curriculum app, which is the green icon in the app library with the notepad and the pencil. Sorry, not the green, the blue. Friday, right? So click on that and you will come to the curriculum dashboard, which will look like this. So when you go into one of our applications, usually you're going to be presented with a page that looks like this, where you're laid out in this box format, like we saw with the student and with the learner app yesterday. These boxes we sometimes call widgets. Each widget has a label. I'm not going to go through everything on this page right now. We're going to save that for one of our trainings next week because we want to focus on searching for lessons, activating lessons, and editing lessons. One thing I do want to point out while we're here, if I scroll down the curriculum dashboard page, you'll see that we have our learner details again. Okay, so the learner details was the first item we covered yesterday in the learner app. That's where we went in to double check that our students' names were spelled correctly, that they were that they had the right service plan year, service plan start date, all of that good stuff. So that widget, that information also appears here on our curriculum dashboard. And if you update it in one place, it will update itself in the ACE will update the learner details on the curriculum dashboard as well. So it appears in 2 places for you. Okay, you can see if I click on the action button like we did yesterday, I can go ahead and get into edit, change some of that information. Okay, going back up to the top of the screen. We also want to be mindful of making sure that we're on the right student. Okay, so we have our blue graduate icons again. The one with text beside it indicates the student profile we're currently looking at, the user profile we're currently looking at. And then the one up at the very top right-hand corner, of the screen enables us to open up the student selector and switch between students. Okay, I'm going to be working off my training student, Cormac Jr. again, like yesterday. But for the purposes of what we'll do, I'm in the breakout rooms. You should be using one of your your specific students in your classroom. Okay. All right, let's talk about searching for lessons. There are 3 different ways we can search for lessons. We can search via keyword. We can browse by scope and sequence. We can reach out to the ACE help desk. I'm going to cover browsing by scope and sequence first. Okay, so on our curriculum dashboard, you will see a widget titled Find Lesson. Okay, and to browse by scope, we're simply going to click on the Browse by Scope button. Page is going to reload, and it's going to take us to a screen that looks like this. Okay. Now on this screen, we will have a drop down right off the bat asking us to select a scope and sequence to search by. So if you click that drop down, you will see 4 different scopes and sequence listed in the drop down. So we have the VB map, the ACE scope and sequence, Common Core, and the Massachusetts Curriculum Frameworks. Now the last one is probably not going to be of interest to you because you all are in New Jersey. We do have a DLA linking grid, which I can show you how to find in our Learning Center. We have talked about the Learning Center, yes, yet. That's going to be another one of my objectives for today. But you might find some utility with the Massachusetts Curriculum Frameworks if there's some carryover between the Massachusetts standards and the New Jersey standards. The scope and sequence that we're going to focus on is the ACE scope and sequence for a couple of reasons. One, I think it'll give you a better sense of the breadth of our curriculum, okay, the types of skills we have lesson plans for, and it might be enable you to better find lesson plans for skills that you're working on that maybe are not academically based, right? So maybe some skills related to vocational work or social skills or transition to adulthood or things like that, you know, for those of you who are working with some older students, okay? So I'm going to search via the scope and sequence first. I'm going to click ACE scope, and then another drop down is going to appear on the screen asking me to select a skill area. So when I click the drop down, you can see the skill areas that I referenced in our intro PowerPoint at the start of yesterday's training. So we can look at academic skills, communication skills, community skills, discrimination skills, and so forth. I'm going to go into social skills for this demonstration. And in social skills, we're going to have an initial skill area, which is establishing reinforcers. And under establishing reinforcers, we have 3 sub-skills. Now, these sub-skills are going to be listed in a loose developmental sequence, going from a basic skill to a more complex skill. So if you look under establishing reinforcers, we have demonstrates preference for at least 5 different items. Next has at least 5 different items that function as reinforcers. Then to I'm utilizing a conditioned reinforcement system. So obviously the first one is a little bit earlier in the sequence than the last one in this list. And you'll also notice that the 3 lessons that are, the 3 skills that are listed here are in blue text. That indicates a hyperlink. If I move my mouse cursor over one of them, you'll see that it'll change from the little arrow pointer to the little hand pointer. Okay, that means if I click on that skill, the page is going to reload, and it's going to bring me, it's going to give me a list of lesson plans from the bank that can be utilized to teach that particular skill. Okay, I'm not going to do that just yet. I'm going to go a little bit deeper. I'm into social skills by selecting a specific section within social skills. Now, there's 2 sections within social skills. I can look at pro-social behavior, or I can look at social interaction. I'm going to click on pro-social behavior. And you can see again, I have a number of skill headings: compliance, waiting, imitation. There's an arrow over here. If I click that, I can see some additional ones under pro-social behavior: time management, group instruction, and classroom behavior. And then under each skill heading, I have all of these sub-skills. Okay, again, this list of sub-skills is listed in a loose developmental sequence, right? So if I look at classroom behavior, for example, we're going from remaining in designated location for duration of lesson or activity, raises hand to answer a question, raises hand to ask a question, raises hand to volunteer, all the way down to helps others in the classroom, manages classroom work assignments. Okay, going from earlier skills to more complex skills as we move down that list. Okay, if we look at time management as another example, going from completing the steps of a 3-item picture or written activity schedule, transitions between activities following a cue, creates own schedule using a calendar, going all the way down to estimates the time it takes to complete an activity, going from more basic skills to more complex, more involved skills. Okay. Last example, looking at imitation, going from imitates actions with objects, imitates gross motor actions, imitating actions with delays, all the way down to imitates a complex task as performed in a video. Okay, you guys are kind of doing that right now. You're kind of following a live video, or maybe you'll do that after this training when you look back at the training videos that we are making. So you can see how these sub skills are listed in this loop developmental sequence. So what you're going to do is kind of look at, well, what type of skill am I trying to find a lesson plan for? And the reason why we kind of go, I'm showing you the scope and sequence first is, again, it gives you an idea of the types of skills we have lesson plans for, because every single sub skill you're seeing on the screen right now, we have at least one lesson plan to teach that skill. Okay. The scope and sequence is also a nice way to get an idea of what earlier skills you might need to look at if your student's not making progress on a goal, on an objective that you wrote for them. Okay, so maybe I wrote a goal for this upcoming IEP year for teaching Timmy how to follow directions within a routine, and he's not doing so hot with it, right? Maybe I want to look at some earlier skills related to compliance, related to direction following, and target those first, maybe build back up to the actual goal that I want to work on. Okay, the scope and sequence might be useful to give you ideas of what skills you might want to work on next. Maybe we're halfway through the IEP year and Timmy masters following directions in a routine, but we're not going to stop. Okay, we maybe want to teach some other skills in and around compliance and around direction following. So I might look at some more complex skills under the area of compliance. This might also give me some ideas of what I might want to put on the next IEP. Okay, Timmy worked on following directions in a routine this year. He did really well. He mastered it. We're getting ready for his next IEP. We're preparing that document for the meeting. We want to propose that we start working on follow if then directions. Or maybe we want to work on negotiating a compromise when presented with an instruction. My 5-year-old is getting really good at that last skill. So what we're going to do here is, once we decide what skill we are interested in, we're going to click on that skill. So I'm actually going to go to one of the skills under imitation. I'm going to go to imitates imitates gross motor actions. Okay, so it's the second sub skill under the area of imitation. And when I click on that sub skill, again, it's hyperlinked. The page is going to reload, and then the ES is going to take me to a page showing me a list of lesson plans that I could use to teach that particular skill that I'm interested in. Okay, depending on the skill that I click, I might see a list with 4 lessons like we're seeing here, 1 lesson. I might see a list of 20 lessons across 2 pages, depends on the skill that I'm interested in. Okay, this particular skill, we have 4 lesson plans in the bank that can be utilized to teach that particular, to teach that particular skill. When we're viewing this list of lessons, we're going to have a column with the lesson ID number. Now, the ID number is a number that we give the lesson, we assign the lesson when we published it in our bank. It's a way for us to find the lesson if we need to update it for whatever reason. Okay. It's also useful for you, as we'll see a little bit later on, in searching via keyword in our lesson bank. Okay. So Rich, for example, might be looking for a lesson plan to teach imitate gross motor actions, and he's in a conversation with Beth, and Beth says, "Oh, I have a lesson plan for Sally. I think it's lesson 111." Rich could search for that lesson using that number. We're going to see how we do that when we search via keyword, when we search through the bank. Okay. Next, on the next column is the lesson name. Okay. We do have some naming conventions that you should be aware of. The first lesson here, lesson 111, you'll see that there's a CS in capitals at the beginning of this lesson name. CS stands for core skill. Okay, that means that this lesson plan was designed to teach one of the skills on our core skills assessment. Core skills assessment is an assessment tool that we developed at NECC that tests 52 prerequisite skills that we believe are essential for our students to have in their repertoire before we start moving to more complex skills. Essential skills to start the process of our student being able to take care of themselves independently. Okay, so this lesson plan is designed to teach one of the skills on that core skills assessment, which so happens to be imitate gross motor actions. Okay, if you see ACAD, I'm in front of a lesson name, that stands for academic. So ACAD, I'm in all caps. That means that lesson plan is more academically focused. It was designed by our academics specialists at NECC. So we're working on some math skills, some English comprehension, some science skills, some history skills, things like that. Some of those lesson plans might suggest might be useful in conjunction with instructing the student using some published curriculum, like reading milestones, for example. We have lesson plans that are kind of linked to those published curriculum that you might be utilizing with some of the students you work with. If you see OT in front of a lesson plan name, that stands for occupational therapy. So lesson plan developed with our occupational therapy department. Okay, so we're looking at fine motor skills, hand skills, gross motor skills, exercise, leisure skills, things like that. And then finally, if you see UAE in front of a lesson name, we don't see any of those on this list. UAE, I'm in all caps, stands for United Arab Emirates. That is a country in the Middle East where we have a sister school. Those lesson plans sometimes have Arabic characters in them. Sometimes they have culturally specific instructions in there. You might want to avoid those lesson plans unless you just so happen to speak Arabic, or you have a learner that speaks Arabic and you are needing to instruct them in Arabic. Chances are you're not, but you might, in which case I would avoid those lesson plans. Okay, you have no idea how many help desk tickets we get from some folks who activate a UAE lesson and then ask us to translate it into English. And our usual suggestion is to refer to the English version of the lesson plan. There's always an English version of the lesson plan as well. So those are our typical naming conventions. The next column indicates what type of lesson plan this is, what instructional format we're going to be utilizing to teach this particular skill using this lesson plan. So the first one here, lesson 111, the lesson type is an SA lesson. SA stands for skill acquisition. That's the name we give to our discrete trial lessons. Okay. So in that lesson plan, we're going to be teaching multiple targets. We're going to be teaching in that discrete trial format. IT stands for incidental teaching. So we're going to be teaching incidentally. We're going to be taking advantage of naturally occurring opportunities across the day or opportunities that we're setting up ourselves. Okay, so generalized imitation of actions, we might be targeting for lesson 1947. We might be getting some teaching opportunities in, the group gym class, okay, or maybe out in the playground when, Johnny's playing with one of his peers and they're doing something, hilarious that kids do on the playground, okay. And then finally, if you see a TA lesson type, none are listed here, but if you did, TA stands for task analysis. So we are teaching a behavior chain, okay, a longer sequence of behaviors tied together, like a hygiene routine, okay, maybe a specific hygiene skill like washing your hands, brushing your teeth, putting on deodorant, maybe a play skill, building a Lego structure, completing a 6-piece puzzle, things like that. Next column is your area column. Your skill area column. These lesson plans note social skills because that's how we find these lesson plans. We went through the social skills area of the scope and sequence, okay? Sometimes lesson plans fall under multiple areas, okay? There is a lot of, there might be some overlap. Social skills may also fall into the area of communication, right? So that will sometimes happen when we're looking at specific lesson plans. And then the last column on the list here is your status column. This indicates whether any of these lessons are currently active or in archive for the student you have currently selected. So remember, I'm still using my practice student, Cormac Jr., and I can see from this list, lesson 111 is currently active for him, okay? The other 3 lessons are blank. That indicates that they are not active, okay? Does anyone have any questions on getting to this point, kind of seeing our list of lessons? And I will jump into other areas of the scope and sequence per request. I can also jump into the VB map if folks are utilizing the VB map as an assessment tool with some of the students they're working with. But for right now, in terms of that workflow, getting from selecting a scope and sequence, kind of whittling down to one of these sub skills, clicking on that and getting our list. Does anyone have any questions?
Cormac, it's John. Real quick, I was going to say the process that you just described would be very similar if they went through a keyword search, correct? The only difference is how they get into this.
Yes. So we're going to talk about a keyword search in a couple of minutes.
Okay, great.
This way, I'm finding lessons. Basically, you're either maybe using the VB map. We can go into that next. You're using the VB map as an assessment tool, and you've identified a skill deficit, and you're going to whittle down through the VB map, kind of using the same kind of workflow that we did with the scope and sequence to find that specific skill deficit. Click on that skill, get a list of lesson plans that then we can look at. Okay, the scope and sequence, you can get access to a hard copy of it. I'll be happy to send that along to everybody or show you where you can find that. it gives you an idea of like the types of the types of skills we have lesson plans for. And that's why I kind of went through social skills first. I can show you some like different skill areas again, so you get an idea of like, wow, I didn't know they would have a lesson plan for this skill, like executive functioning related skills. We have lesson plans to teach skills related to that area. So from this list, I have 4 lesson plans, which seems pretty manageable, but I might not know based on the name alone which lesson plan is going to be the right one for me and my student, okay, for what I want to accomplish with my student. What you're looking for when you're looking at lesson plans is you want to make sure that the lesson plan is being taught in a way that makes sense for that learner. And you also want to save yourself some time. You don't want to, select a lesson plan that then you have to make heavy edits to, right? So you're going to try to find a lesson plan that best fits how you want to teach the skill to the student and maybe has a lot of the teaching procedures that you would like to utilize already incorporated in it. Maybe some of the targets that you would teach already incorporated within the lesson plan, okay, to save yourself less work. So that's what you should be thinking of when you are selecting a lesson plan. To view the lesson plan, to get a preview of the lesson plan, there's 2 ways to do it. The first way is to click on the ID number. Okay, you can see the ID number is in blue, hyperlink when we click on it. So lesson 111. The page is going to reload. It's going to bring us to a lesson view page that looks like this. So here we have our lesson details on the left-hand side. Okay, so this is an essay lesson. This is how our essay or discrete child lessons are structured. At the top, you're going to have lesson details, giving you lesson ID number, lesson name, and whether it's a core skill or not, teaching a core skill or not. Next, we have an objective statement. Okay, this is a default objective statement. Okay, like we started to discuss yesterday when we were creating our learner profiles, a lot of items on our lesson plans can be modified. Okay, that includes the ACE lesson objective. Okay, so we can change the generalization criterion, for example, the level of performance we want to see, and the number of sessions, the consistency we want to see the student perform the skill at that performance level before we consider the skill mastered. We can also change the number of targets that we want to teach this skill across. Okay, right now it's saying 9 actions, but we could change that to 12, 15, 21, or we could change it down to 3 or 1, depending on the skill, depending on the learner, depending on how long or how quickly our student can acquire skills with different targets. Okay. Below that, we have an instruction section giving you information on what materials you should have for this lesson, what to do for reinforcement, and a correction procedure if the student makes an error. And then what are the data collection codes for this lesson. Below that, we have a procedure section. So this is an essay lesson or a discrete child lesson. Our essay lessons are built on a levels program. Okay, the levels pertain to skill complexity. So some of our lesson plans like this one might only have 1 level. We're teaching the whole skill in 1 level. Okay, other lesson plans, other skills are a little bit more complex. We might be gradually increasing the complexity of the skill as we move through the levels. So for example, if we are teaching money equivalents, we might be teaching the student to indicate named coins in level 1, match coins in level 2, receptively ID coins in level 3, match coins to printed price in level 4, building on the complexity of the skill as we get up to like level 8 or level 9. Okay, so some lesson plans will have 1 level like this one. Other lesson plans might have multiple levels. We're building on the complexity of the skill as we move through the levels. Answer and reciprocate social questions. Lesson plan that has 2 levels. Level 1, we're teaching the student to answer social questions. Level 2, we're teaching the student to answer and ask social questions. Okay, to answer the question, what is your name? And then ask the other person, what is your name? Okay, building on teaching that whole skill across 2 levels. Each level will have its own prescribed teacher behavior. We'll have a suggested prompt and fading procedure. Again, these are items that you can change. And then learner behavior, okay, what the student should be doing, what we're trying to accomplish with teaching this particular skill. Okay, the teacher behavior and the learner behavior, we can add more information to this. Okay, we're going to see that when we start editing the lessons. Okay. Below the procedures section, you're going to have an instructional plan. Your instructional plan are your targets. Okay, the stimuli, the questions, the numbers, the words, depending on the skill that you're trying to teach the skill across. Okay, so this lesson plan, we're trying to teach the student to imitate gross motor actions. Here is a list of suggested gross motor actions that we could teach the student to imitate, okay? Most of our lesson plans will have suggested targets already built into them, okay? Those targets you can use. You don't have to use. You can change, you can add to, you can delete, you can make lots of changes to the targets that we have suggested in our lesson plans, okay? Typically, with a lot of our lesson plans, you're going to see the targets grouped in 2s, 3s, or 4s. Most commonly 3s, okay, like you're seeing here. And they're going to be arranged across what we call sub-levels. So here we have sub-level 1.01, and we're teaching these targets, sub-level 1.02, and we're teaching these targets, and level 1.03, and we're teaching these targets. We typically group multiple targets to be taught at the same time because it helps with discrimination skills, okay? It helps prevent a situation where I'm teaching Timmy to clap, but maybe I find out that Timmy is not clapping because I say clap. Timmy's clapping because there's another stimulus that is controlling that response. And I might not learn that until I start working on the next target. And I'm in isolation, which might be tap table. I say tap table and Timmy claps his hands. I'm like, oh crap, I did not teach Timmy to follow, I did not teach Timmy, I got skills messed up. I did not teach Timmy to model my my imitation clapping. I taught Timmy to clap when he's sitting facing the teacher and the teacher does something, okay? So that's why we like to teach more than one target at a time. Again, this is something that you can change. You want to teach less targets at a time, you can change it. You want to add more targets to teach at a time, you can change that. There's lots of flexibility with changing the instructional plan, changing the teaching targets. Some lesson plans might only, I might have placeholders for targets. So reading milestones, teaching sight words, things like that. Teaching sight words, it's going to say word 1, word 2, word 3. There are lots of words in the English dictionary. We're going to leave it to you to decide which words are going to be most functionally important for your learner you're activating that lesson plan for. Below the instructional plan, you're going to have your criteria section. Your criteria is your the instructions for the teacher, for the instructor to know when they should feed the prompt, okay? So right now, the default settings for this lesson, we are using a physical prompt and we're feeding via time delay. We got to give the teachers, the instructors information for when to feed from that immediate physical prompt to a 2-second delay, 2 seconds to a 4-second, and so forth. So that's where our criteria section comes in. Again, this is something that can be modified, that can be changed, that can be edited. It's something that can be changed in a variety of different ways. So we're going to have our criteria for fitting the prompt. We're going to have our criteria for adding more prompt, more prompting, more help if the student starts to make lots of errors. Okay, when we get to that 2-second delay or 4-second delay, we're going to have a criteria for when we should get help, when we should revise the lesson because the student is not making progress in the way that we hope they would. Okay, and there are 2 different types of get help, revise lesson criteria. Okay, and then lastly, we're going to have our mastery criteria for the targets that we're teaching. That mastery criteria comes directly from the selections that we made in the ACE lesson objective. Okay, below the criteria section, you're going to have an assessment section giving you a list of prerequisite skills that you might want to consider testing the student has before you start teaching this particular skill using this lesson plan. Information on how to do your initial assessment and run your baseline sessions. Below the assessment section, you have a maintenance section with information for how often you should run maintenance sessions. Okay, check in on those master targets to make sure the student's maintaining the skill with those targets. What to do for reinforcement, maybe in those maintenance sessions, you want to thin the schedule of reinforcement. And then finally, criteria for reteaching. Okay, if the student starts to make lots of errors in these maintenance sessions, you might need to reteach some of those master targets. And then the last section on the lesson plan is a scope section, indicating where this lesson plan is linked to across the scopes and sequences that our curriculum is aligned to, okay? So obviously we're seeing at least one area on the ACE scope and sequence. That's how we find this lesson plan, okay? All of our lesson plans have at least one entry on the ACE scope and sequence. And then some lesson plans like this one might fall under areas on different scopes and sequences. This lesson plan can be used to address certain skills across 2 different levels on the VB map. Okay. So that's the structure of one of our essay lesson plans. And in this view, of looking at this lesson plan. The other nice thing about looking at the lesson plan in this view is on the right-hand side, you're going to have a lesson materials widget. Okay, some lesson plans have additional materials. Okay, some demonstration videos that you can refer to see how the lesson plan generally is being taught. You might also have some additional resources. Okay, so some of our academic lessons, for example, will have some, pre-made problem worksheets. Like if I find a lesson plan for teaching simple math or long division, I'm going to find some worksheets along there. And then below the lesson materials, you're going to see a view print pictures lesson. If the lesson plan utilizes picture stimuli that you, as part of the teaching process, you'll see some picture stimuli listed here that you can download and print off to use within your teaching session. This lesson plan, we're teaching imitation skills, gross motor action imitation skills. So there's there's no pictures required. That's why you're seeing no images there. Okay. So that's one way to look at our lesson plan. Okay, to get back to the previous page to have a look at some of the other lesson plans we might be interested in. We can either click the action button and click close, or we can scroll down to the bottom of the page and hit the close button there. I'm going to click this close button, and that's going to bring me back to the previous page, which again looks like this. Okay, so one way to look at our lesson plan to preview the lesson plan is to click on that ID number. Separate way is to select the lesson by clicking on the box, click your action button, and click print selection. When you click print selection, a new tab will open up on your browser, giving you the lesson plan again. Okay, the difference with this view and the previous view that we looked at, we're not seeing those additional materials. Okay, the picture stimuli that might be associated with the lesson plan that we're viewing. Okay, we're just getting the lesson plan. But we're getting the same information that we saw before. Lesson details, instructions, procedures, instructional plan, all of that good stuff. The nice thing about looking at the lesson plan in this view, it's on a separate tab on our web browser. That means I could keep this this tab open, click back to the tab I had open previously, which is over here. Select another lesson plan, this one here, 1947. Click the action button and do the same thing. Click print selection. Now I have two tabs open at the same time. Okay, now I can better compare and contrast and see which lesson plan might be the right one for how I want to teach the skill to Cormac Jr. right now. Okay, this second lesson plan that I have open is an example of an Instructional teaching lesson plan. So some of the areas of the lesson plan are similar: lesson details, objective, instructions. The instruction section, because this is an Instructional teaching lesson, there is an element of environmental arrangement. Okay, we want to set the environment up to evoke a teaching opportunity. Okay, so this gives you information on how we're going to set up the environment to teach this particular skill, which is generalized imitation of actions. Below the instruction section on an Instructional teaching lesson, we have a response section giving you information on what an independent response should look like. Okay, Instructional teaching lessons are student-led versus being teacher-led. So that's why you're seeing learner behavior first and then teacher behavior. Information on the prompted response, information on an opportunity situation. Below that, again, we have an instructional plan. The instructional plan lists context, not sublevels. Okay, context might be the different locations or the different activities, the different environmental arrangement that we're going to set up to teach the skill across. So for this particular skill, we want to teach the student to imitate actions of adults, also imitate actions of peers, imitates actions with objects, imitates sequence of actions. We can, again, modify these contexts, change them, add to them, delete them, okay? Criteria for prompt fitting, criteria for getting help, criteria for mastery for each context. Again, we have an assessment section with suggested prerequisites listed, how to run baseline, a maintenance section, and again, we have our scope section, indicate where this lesson plan falls under our A scope and sequence, VB map, and depending on the skill, depending on the lesson, maybe some of the additional scopes and sequences we saw in our first drop down when we went into searching via scope and sequence. Okay. As well as having this lesson plan open in a separate tab, so you can have multiple tabs open at the same time. There's also a big old print button at the top of the screen. Okay, so you could print the lesson plan off to bring to a meeting, to show to a parent, to do all those sorts of things. Okay, so that's another option when you click print selection and view the lesson plan in this format. Okay. Does anyone have any questions on how to preview lesson plans? Now, just to note, we have not activated anything yet. Okay, I have not had an activate button. I'm just looking at these lessons. I haven't activated any lessons yet. We're going to do that next. Okay, but any questions thus far? I'm going to hit the back button to go back to our select scope sequence or select scope page. I'm going to go back into the scope and sequence. I'm going to go to a different skill area again, just to give you an idea of the types of skills we have lesson plans for. I'm going to go to transition to adulthood. For some of you folks who are working with maybe older students. First skill area under transition to adulthood, executive functioning. Going from it again, skills listed in a loose developmental sequence, tolerates non-preferred interaction, transitions between activities, remembers and identifies missing items. Go down to the latter, the more complex skills under executive functioning, schedules appointments by phone or online, plans all aspects of an outing or activity. More advanced, more complicated, more involved skill. Okay. Under the sections under transition to adulthood, community skills for adulthood, functional academics, independent living, post-secondary opportunities, self-determination. Again, if we click into one of these, functional academics, for example, functional ELA, functional math. Okay, going from identify money, counting out bills using next highest dollar, down to maintains records for any financial account. I'm really bad at that myself. Balances checking account. I don't know how many people still do that. Okay, we don't have checkbooks anymore. Okay, again, just giving you an idea of the types of skills we have lesson plans for. Okay, that's why I like showing the scope and sequence first. It's a good thing to explore to get an idea of the types of skills we have lesson plans for. It gives you an idea of the breadth of our curriculum. Okay. While we're here, before we move on to searching via keyword, would anyone like to look at the VB map if you're utilizing the VB map with the students you work with as an assessment tool?
Most of these folks will be using AFLs or ABLs. Cormac, it's the group in September that'll be talking more in detail about the VB map.
Perfect. Okay, then I will move on. Glad I just stuck to the scope and sequence. Okay, so that's how we search through search via scope and sequence. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about how to search via keyword. Okay, so to get back to the curriculum dashboard, I'm going to use my quick links, which are right here. So I'm on browse. I'm browsing by scope and sequence. I want to search via keyword next. I'm going to go back to the curriculum dashboard to do that. Okay, so I'm going to click curriculum right here. And that's brought me back to the curriculum dashboard. So I'm going to look for my find lesson widget like we did before. There it is there. Instead of clicking on browse by scope, I'm going to search via, I'm going to search for a lesson name or an ID number. So when I'm searching via keyword, I have a skill in mind that I want to teach. I'm going to type in some keywords related to that skill. So let's say I want to work on responding to stop. Okay, I want my student to respond to stop when I give him or her a stop cue when we're like walking in the hallway. Okay, I'm going to type in responding to stop, click the go button. This is going to bring me into the lesson bank, and it's going to search through all 2,200 lessons using my keywords, and oh golly, I don't have any results at all. Okay, when you're searching via keyword, we recommend using the root word. Okay, so drop plurals, drop INGs. Okay, try to use root word searches. Okay, so over on the left-hand side, you'll see a filter bar. There's the keywords that I use to search. I'm going to drop the ING and search for respond to stop instead. I'm going to click the go button. And now my number of results jumps from 0 to 12. Here are 12 lesson plans that I could utilize to teach the respond to stop skill. Okay. Using the filters, I could filter down even further. Maybe I want to teach this skill in an Excel teaching format. That's brought the number of results from 12 down to 2. Okay, so there's different ways I can filter using that filter column on the left-hand side. Like before, the lessons are going to be listed in this format. Okay, so we're going to have an ID column, a name column, lesson type. IT are only listed here because I filtered for just IT lessons. Skill area, you can see that these lesson plans fall under multiple areas on our scope and sequence. In the area of communication, community, transition to adulthood, health and safety, to name but a few. And then finally, that column indicating the status of the lesson, whether any of these lesson plans are currently active or in archive for my student. Okay. And then from here, I'll do the same thing I did before. I could either click on the ID number to preview the lesson, or I could select the lesson, click the action button, and click that print selection button. Okay. I'm going to take off the filter for IT lessons. Just to note, there's one of those UAE lessons. Okay, I didn't lie. We have some lessons that are designed for our program in the United Arab Emirates. That's right there. And if you wanted to look at the whole lesson bank, if you click clear filters, that will clear all the filters that you were searching by. I didn't lie to you guys. We have over 2,200 lessons in our bank. Okay. Those 2,200 lessons are organized across 222 pages. I don't recommend going through all 222 pages unless you have a lot of time on your hand. I doubt that you do. So you're going to search via scope and sequence. You're going to search using really good keyword searches. And if that all fails, you can't find a lesson plan for the specific skill that you're trying to teach. The third way to find a lesson plan is to click on that big old help button down at the bottom and contact the help desk. Okay. Help desk are wonderful at navigating our huge lesson bank, okay? Because they review those lesson plans, they advise people on those lesson plans, they create some of those lesson plans. They have really good ideas of what lesson plan is going to fit your specific skill need for your students, okay? When you ask the help desk for a lesson suggestion, they are going to give you a list of lessons back. The list of lessons is going to be, I'm containing the lesson name. It's also going to contain the lesson ID number, okay? That makes it really easy for you to find that lesson in the bank. So for example, if I'm looking to teach Johnny to better share with his friends, and I ask the help desk for a suggested lesson, they might suggest lesson 1838. When I get into the bank, I can just type in 1838 in my keyword. There's that lesson plan to teach share items with a peer, a lesson plan that was suggested by the help desk. Okay. They're really, really useful to find lesson plans. There's not usually a skill that we don't have a lesson plan for. If there just so happens to not be a lesson plan for a particular skill that you're trying to work on with your learner, in some cases, we might write a lesson plan for you. Okay. In other cases, we might give you a suggested lesson plan and give you the steps to maybe modify to fit your need. I had a insurance-based client a few years ago that was looking for, I reached out to the help desk looking for a lesson plan to teach horseback riding. Horseback riding is not part of our scope and sequence. It does not appear on the VB map. I doubt that it appears on the ABLs or the AFLs, but we wanted to help this client. So we suggested a generic task analysis lesson that they could change the name of and modify the steps for to teach horseback riding. And I don't know if the student learned horseback riding, but the user had a lesson plan to teach the skill and to collect data. So that's an example of utilizing the help desk. Okay, I've been talking for about 50 minutes. I'm going to give you guys some work to do. We haven't talked about activating a lesson yet. That's okay. I'm going to show you how to activate a lesson next. But what I want you to do is I want you to start playing around with searching for lesson plans for the goals you have written for your students. So you can search via scope and sequence. You can search via keyword. Okay, those are two ways that I've shown you how to search for lessons. I would leave off contacting the help desk right now. I would save that for maybe a non-training day, right? When you're kind of getting in and setting up the rest of your lesson plans for your students, by all means, please use the help desk. I just don't want them to be bombarded with, 49 emails from folks from Bancroft looking for lesson plans. So try searching through this via scope and sequence. Try searching via keyword to find some lesson plans for the kiddos whom you work with. Okay. What I would recommend doing, you find a lesson plan that you like, make a little note of it. You know what the ID numbers are, okay? The next thing we're going to cover together is how to activate lesson plans, okay? And we'll do that next. I just want to get you to get kind of get in there and start searching for lesson plans. I'm going to open up the breakout rooms, and then I can pop in and see how everyone's doing, answer any questions that might pop up, okay? So I just opened the rooms. Amani and Nicholas, you guys are not assigned to your room. I think that was similar from yesterday. What room should I assign you to? Sarah and John's, Katarina's, Megan's, or Abby's?
Okay.
Yes.
Oh.
Just start talking.
Yeah.
Hi, format.
Hi.
I have a question. I have two actually.
Yep.
Oh wait, I have to unmute him, right? Is there a way you could put me in Megan's breakout room again?
Certainly.
Oh, thank you. And then I sent you an email, but I think I'm just gonna ask this. Can you change my classroom to, it was B210, but for ESY, I am in B209.
B209. I will change that for you right now.
Awesome, thank you.
No problem. I assigned you to Megan's room.
Thank you.
Amani and Nicholas, what room should I put you into? Maybe you're in the same location as everyone else, so I'll leave it. I'm just going to jump into your room that's asked for some help. So I'll be back. If you guys need me to put you in a breakout room, just let me know. I'll be back in a second. Hi, everyone. I believe there are two folks that need to be placed in a different breakout room.
I'm not in any of them, I don't think.
So I have Christina Ursa. She's not in any of the breakout rooms.
It says it should start in a few seconds. It's because you missed yesterday.
Christina's in your room, Katarina, right now. Which room do you need me to move her to?
Yeah. Did you accept?
Yes, are you in?
No, I just, your meeting should start in a few seconds.
She says she's waiting. Her meeting will start in a few seconds.
Oh. Let me go into the main room. I'll come back in a second because if she's in the waiting room for the meeting, I have her listed, Christina Urso, I have her listed in the meeting and in the breakout room right now.
I think I have it. Was it yours?
Anybody else?
I had two folks that were not assigned to rooms. That was Amani Phillips and Nicholas Intrim Bartolo.
Yes. So Nicholas goes into Megan's classroom.
Okay.
And Imani, does you know Imani where she, who she takes?
She's, I don't know what room she was in.
Hey, Katarina.
She's doing it
Yeah.
now.
So hi. So
Hey,
is Cormac with you? Is Cormac with you?
I'm right
yes,
here.
how did you get in?
Well, because
You're logged in because you're logged in on Katarina.
I am. So
Yep.
it's me and my other colleague because we used Katarina's link because I couldn't find my link, so I
Okay.
copied it. So there's two of us. Can you put us in my room?
Which one is your room?
I'm Abby.
You're Abby, sorry.
Mine said.
That's okay.
So Abby, I'm putting you in, and who else?
Then so Colin, did you join?
How about Nicholas? Nick, where does he go?
And Nicholas is in the wrong room as well. He's still in the
He's still in the main room, or he? Yes, he is in Megan's room. I can move him into Abby's room.
Join it now.
How about Imani? Abby, do you know Imani? Whose classroom is she taking over?
Just put her in Megan's. Put Nick and Amani in Megan's group.
Oh, I just
Okay,
moved
good,
Nick
yes.
into your room. Let me move him back. And then Abby, you need to go into your room, and who else needs to go into your room?
I'm gonna
From-
send her right now. Did you join, right? Yeah, join. It says it should be a spot where it says join. Yes. Colleen's joining right now. Hold on.
I am coming in.
It's good. You're gonna join the room I'm in right now that says Katarina, because there's two Katarinas. It's all good.
Abby, do you mind going into the main room? I don't want to actually move this
Yes,
Katarina
so-
into, okay,
Yep,
back
so both
into-
of us will go back into the main room.
perfect. And then I can assign you to the other room.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Cormac. All right. So
And
go into the main
Cormac,
room.
Christine is good to go.
Good to go. Perfect.
Good to go.
Okay, Abby, I'll put you in your room. Oh, where's the-
So there's two of us.
There's two under Katarina. Okay,
Yep.
gotcha.
Hey, so we have some teachers that are having a little bit of trouble finding similar goals for some of the ones that they have.
Okay.
Do you guys want to speak up and say which ones it is?
Oh, God. Initiating a task, more like on the lines of vocational task.
Vocational tasks.
So initiating a vocational task.
Initiating a task.
Okay. So what screen am I sharing here? Sorry. There we go. Yeah, I'm sharing the right one. So I'm gonna. There's two ways we could search. Have you searched via scope and sequence or keyword?
I tried it both ways.
Tried both ways. Okay. So let's.
It's okay though, at least you get to what you mean.
And would you like to teach this incidentally or in like discrete trial?
It doesn't matter, just free trial.
Okay. So initiate task. New task. That describes. I'm going to organize these by.
Yeah, so write down whatever ones you want. And then add them all. In the next step, yeah, we're gonna add them all to ours.
So it might be better incidental. Let's see. We'll try initiate instead.
These are broad.
All right, I'm gonna try.
I know. Oh, we have a couple, we have a lot going.
Here's one that might work. So it's comply with familiar task. I'm just going to open up what this plan this looks like. So across 3 people, 3 settings, given a verbal directive, like a vocational task, learner will initiate and complete familiar task activities and routines within a targeted amount of time at 100% programmed opportunities. Does that fit what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I couldn't, I can't read some more way. That's fast.
So don't worry about the name of the lesson being different from what you have written on your like what you've written for your goal, what you've for your objective. The next thing we're going to do is talk about how to activate the lesson, and then we're going to talk about how to edit the lesson. When we activate the lesson, we can change the name of the lesson. Okay, that lesson might be a good first step. The help desk might have other suggestions. When you're searching via keyword, what I did there is like I kind of thought about the skill and like played around with some other words that might fit what we're trying to accomplish. From the way you described it, it sounded like, all right, I want the student to initiate the task when they're instructed to do so, and probably pretty quickly. Is that what you're trying to accomplish?
Yes.
So that's why I typed in latency, because that made sense to me. Like, hey, I want to decrease the latency from the instruction to them completing a known task, or to start a task that they typically or they should be required to do. So that's why I thought about playing around with latency as my keyword.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and that lesson, if you don't want to type in latency, is lesson 1807. Is someone else I can help while I'm here?
Was there anyone else who needed to find a lesson that they couldn't find?
No, are we just like checking them?
Yeah, I want you guys to find try to find between 1 and 3 lessons for your student, because the next thing we're going to do when we're back in the main group is to activate a lesson. So I want to make sure you find a lesson that is relevant to a goal that you're working on with your student.
And so after they find them, are they checking them?
I would just make a note of the number or how you find the lesson, because then when I get back in, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to activate a lesson for my student that might be different from the lesson you're going to activate for your student. Okay.
Okay, so they just need to note down the ID
Yeah,
number?
and then you know how to find it. So again, if I went into searching via keyword, 1807. Yeah, there's 1807. That's a lesson plan that I'm going to activate because I'm in this room right now and I wanted to find a lesson to have my student initiate their vocational work, their vocational task.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you.
No problem.
Hello again.
Hi.
We have another question. So some of our teachers are kind of looking ahead and looking at the data sheets that come out.
Mhm.
And next to the session spot, it says BL, which we figured out as baseline. TR, which we figured out means like the teaching, but we don't know what the actual letters are for it. What's the
Training.
training? Okay. MT, maintenance. And then what is PR?
PR is probe.
Probe.
I'm going to talk about the data
Probe.
sheets when we get back.
Yeah. I'm sorry, say that again.
I'm going to talk about the data sheets when we get back. The data sheets that you may be looking at are going to be the default data sheets. When we activate the lesson, we can make those, we can modify them, we can make them more specific to the changes we've made to the lesson for our learner. I'm going to talk about them, but you guys asked, PR stands for probe. A probe session might be something that we implement, after we've done some teaching. So maybe we suspect, like after 2 teaching sessions, wow, I think Billy might actually have this skill. I'm going to run a probe session, which is basically baseline again, where I'm not prompting. I'm not doing an error correction. If he makes any errors, I'm kind of probing to see where he is. So that might be one context in which I might do a probe session. I might do a probe session if, I was at the 2-second delayed prompt on December 24th, and then my student, was on vacation for a week for the holidays. And then he comes back, I want to, instead of like jumping right into, where I left off like a week and a half ago, I might want to run a probe session to see if maybe he's regressed a little bit in that week and a half he was off, or maybe he's like kind of still at the level he was at before, and then I continue where I was in the.
Okay, so we were also looking at it because of like the order that it is written on the data sheet. So like obviously baseline comes first, teaching comes next, so maintenance. So then probe is like the extended time beyond maintenance.
It could be. Like I say, it's used as a for a variety of reasons. Those 2 scenarios that I spoke about, it might be used in the context of I want to run a probe session for this skill with like different stimuli, or like similar stimuli, but it looks kind of like the same. Like I taught Billy to respond to or indicate on the numbers 1, 2, 3. I'm going to run a probe session with like the numbers like on the whiteboard, or in a different font, things like that.
Okay.
Last scenario. Last scenario for a probe session, just while you guys are talking about it. Probe session might be something that an SLP or an OT considers. So what happens sometimes is that, a SLP will have, their speech goals for the learner. Will activate some lesson plans for the direct care staff to be working on during the week. But that SLP might have like weekly speech sessions with that student. They might utilize the probe session data collection area to assess the skill with their expertise in mind, right? Because obviously they're gonna view the skill through a different lens based on their training as an SLP versus the direct care staff. So that's another scenario where you might run a probe session.
Okay. And I have another teacher that was about to ask me a question, but since you're on with us, you can ask you. So we have he has the numbers that like the code, the ID number.
Mm-hmm.
Once he has that.
Yes, and I don't want to search again with a keyword. I want to search with the ID number.
Yeah, so how does he search with just the ID number to pull it up again?
Yep. So I'm gonna share my screen again. So I just happen to be on the curriculum dashboard. Can you guys see that okay?
Yes.
So in keyword, what's the number? What's the ID number?
75.
75. So I'm gonna type in 75, click the go button. And there it is. So was the lesson clear table non-disposable?
Oh, yeah, he said that, all right, he understands. I pulled it up.
You can also search for it over there, right? So if I was in like the main lesson library, like here, I see all 2,214 entries. I could type in 75 here in keyword, click go. Again, that one lesson pops up.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Does anybody else have a question for Cormac at this minute while we have him? No. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Hi, Katerina.
Hey, Cormac.
Hi.
Okay, so Cormac, sorry for interruption. We do have a few questions for you. because we weren't able to find few of the goals, so maybe
Okay.
to go somewhere else. All right, can you hear us like from distance?
I think I can.
Okay, good. So who would like to start with good questions?
I have a question. I have a student with a skill, like one of his IEP goals is to pay attention to text through various ways, and no matter how I type it into the search, the keyword search, I can't find anything that really measures whether or not he's attending to text.
So is it a reading
It's
goal?
written under reading, but it's not reading, it's to attend to text, whether it's a how-to, step-by-step, worksheet, it's very vague.
So it kind of, I understand you're saying that the skill is attend to text. It sounds like, does he or she have to engage in some response to verify that they have attended to text, like read it out loud, or?
It doesn't say that the way that the goal is written, it's just to attend to the text. By the end of this IEP, during the classroom setting or during a classroom-led activity, the student will attend to a book, a story, or vocational written material independently, 80% accurate with accuracy.
So maybe he just needs to, well, engaging with the book, maybe just like staying on task.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, so I would consider, so can you guys see my screen okay?
Yeah.
So I might type in attend. And then look at either an attending skill. Listen to story doesn't really fit because he or she's looking at their own book, to your point. Participation possibly.
I feel like participation is accurate.
And I want to note, because one of the other groups, we were doing the same thing. So I'm glad you guys called me in to like help assist search for and looking for some lesson plans. We're just looking right now on the next step. Once I bring everyone back, which is probably going to be in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to show you guys how to activate a lesson. Just because the lesson has this particular name, we can change the name of the lesson. So it doesn't have to be called participation. We can call it whatever you do, whatever way you describe the goal on the student's IEP. So if it was attend to text, we could change this participation, attend activity with, I'm actually going to
Perfect.
do this. We can change this from a participation attend activity with appropriate behavior to attend to text. And you can see the skill, if you look at the lesson objective, learner will participate in an activity, environment, or event by attending in the absence of challenging behavior. I'm 100%.
I feel like that's perfect.
That looks, we might modify some parts of that, but that seems to be capturing what skill you're trying to target.
And once we activate it, we can go in and we can modify our each lesson as necessary, correct? Like,
Yeah. So the next thing we're going to do together is activate some of those lesson plans y'all find in this breakout room. Some cases like yours, we might change the name to better fit how we describe this goal on the IEP.
okay.
And then after we do that, we're going to go into the editing page, and then we're going to make further edits to the lesson. Maybe change some of the teaching strategies, the targets, et cetera, et cetera. So for like your kiddo, your instructional plan right now, it's academic group instruction, 20-minute, 40-minute, 60-minute, community event, 20-minute, 40-minute, 60-minute. You might modify those to be, a worksheet in the classroom and for 5, 10, 15 minutes, maybe 20, 46 minutes, depending on the student, depending on how their typical learning environment. And then you could maybe add in, I think you mentioned, like a reading book or something like that. Again, having those sub-levels to target that specific situation.
Okay, thank you.
Problem.
Cormac, are we going to regroup in like 5 minutes?
Yeah, I'm going to put a notice out to everybody about 5 minutes to kind of regroup, and then we'll move on to the next part of the training.
We still have more questions.
Okay.
I cannot find anything for, we'll sign 10 new ASL words or phrases.
So growing vocabulary.
I just I wrote ASL and I go to communication and it wants them to either speak or listen.
About sign language.
So we do have lesson plans to teach across different commutative topographies. So vocal responses, to your point, sign and AAC devices. When we're teaching the lesson plans we have for communication skills, we try to specify what type of verbal response we're trying to target. So the signs you're going to be working on, would they be used in the context of requesting items, requesting like, toys, activities, food items, things like that, or would you be teaching these signs to maybe comment on ongoing activities?
More like bathroom finished, more, I need, yeah, well, eat, and, I mean,
So it sounds like requesting. Yep.
more like, yeah, I'm requesting or, exactly, functional, like functional in his life as.
Yeah.
opposed to
So I'm in the, if you can see my screen, I'm in the lesson bank right now. I'm going to type in request as my keyword. And then under request, you're going to see different lesson plans to teach specific requests. You can see there at the top, there's request assistance. Further down, you can see request break. I think those were two of the functional communicative responses you'd like to teach on this learner. You'll notice beside these lesson plans, this is a great, I should have mentioned this when we were talking about our lesson banks. I'm in the lesson names. At the top of my screen right now, you can see two different lessons or a number of lessons that are teaching specific requesting responses. But in parentheses, afterwards, you can see different modalities. So a motor response, vocal response, et cetera, et cetera. The motor responses, that's your signs. So what I might consider is looking for either a general requesting lesson, because it sounds like you want to teach a multitude of different responses to your point. I need help, I want a break, I want, this thing or that thing, I want a hug or a high five. Or you might consider activating multiple lesson plans to target each individual request. So for example, you can see there on my screen, lesson 656, request termination, a motor response. I'm using a motor response like sign.
Is he asking me a question?
No, I was, it wasn't a question. So is that helpful?
I think I have a follow-up about this, because probably this is not really about mending, it's about acting. Like we're not probably doing requests, we're just trying to enhance his vocabulary in sign language.
Okay.
So in that case, I mean, it sounded like it was requesting bathroom. Sorry, it sounded like it was requesting bathroom or change of activity, but if it is tacting, then I would be, there's a couple of things I might type in. I might type in vocab.
Okay, vocab, yes.
Yeah.
And there you have a number of lesson plans related to vocabulary. Looking at the name of this one, I mean, it's teaching a motor responses like sign. I don't know if vocabulary equivalence is what you're really looking for, but let's have a quick look at it. Learner will match named objects to pictures, objects to pictures, pictures to objects, and name pictures. No, that's not what we're looking for. Let's see. We could name weather conditions. No.
What about this one, lesson ID 1353, across two persons in two settings, given a known problem situation, the learner will independently use functional communication in 80% of opportunities. That's pretty much what they're doing. It doesn't have to be very specific to ASL. You can just edit it in there.
What was that number?
1353. Where it says 5 lesson.
By the way,
Use functional communication.
That's right. So like. Cormac did that, by the way. He just put in.
Oh, yeah, that's.
Yeah. This one is a, but it is a vocal response. I'm going to type in functional communication, and there's a similar looking lesson. Lesson 2211 is using functional communication motor. But I will say this lesson looks more, it's an instructional teaching lesson. So if your student can learn in that modality, and you're going to take advantage of situations where they are trying to request attention or help, that might be useful there in that context.
Okay. All right, thank you.
There's also the one 2102 has is both motor and vocal. Just put it, if you put in functional communication, there's like 5 or 6 given that.
I don't know. He was. I would wait. It's okay. Can we wait? Yeah, yeah. It's just like.
Was that helpful?
Yeah. Not necessarily sure.
Well, we'll have more questions probably later.
Okay. Katerina, I'm going to go back into the main session and then just prompt everyone to come back to move on to activation, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Don't lose that question, Rach.
A couple of the rooms to help with some lesson finding for some goals. And when I was in there, I did hit the record button to make sure that those conversations were captured in the training video, and I think they were very useful. One thing that was very apparent when I was answering some of those questions is that the lessons you might find for the specific or the goal that you're looking for a lesson plan for, the wording that we might use for that skill might be slightly different. So we do have some tips for how to search. There is a help center which I'm going to review before we end today that has an article related to searching for lessons via keyword and some tips we have. One of the ones to consider is synonyms or alternative ways lessons might be worded. So for example, in one of the breakout rooms, a teacher was looking for a lesson for a learner to initiate their vocational work, their vocational tasks. And I decided to kind of search for the lesson in a different way and kind of look at like latency. So latency to beginning a task. So when we typed in latency, we were able to find a lesson that really fit that need. Now, the lessons that you may have looked at during the breakout room, the name of the lesson is something that you can change when you activate the lesson. That's what we're going to be covering next. So if you find a lesson and you're like, oh, I really like this, but the name is just like awful. It doesn't really capture the goal that I've written on the IP. That's okay. We can change the name of the lesson. So that's something just to bear in mind. I had another example of a teacher looking for lessons to cover teaching some functional communication using sign language. There were a couple lessons we found that were like broader use of functional communication. It contained in one lesson, and then there were also like sub lessons to teach specific communicative responses using sign language, like requesting assistance, requesting a break, things like that. And that's okay. Maybe depending on the learner, depending on what we're accomplishing, we can activate multiple lesson plans for one goal if our goal is written broadly, or we might activate one lesson to target that goal. So that's always that flexibility. You can activate as many lessons as you want or need to address the goals that you've written. This help article also has a link of some like keyword suggestions you might consider across different areas. So like some broad categories you might consider, like receptive listener, expressive speaker, early elementary, secondary, some like broader keyword categories to search by. And then there's some words you might consider when you're searching through different or specific skill areas, like words related to discrimination skills, communication skills, social skills, et cetera, et cetera. Before we finish today, I'll show you where to find this particular keyword suggestion PDF article. The other thing that might be useful, again, in kind of getting an idea of how we name our skills in our scope and sequence, is to look at the whole scope and sequence. I can appreciate that searching, browsing via scope and sequence, you're kind of going one area by one area. It'd be nice to see the whole scope and sequence more broadly. And you guys do have access to a hard copy of our scope and sequence. To find that, I just went back to the app library on my screen. I'm going to go into this resources app that you should be able to see on your screen. And the resources app is a big app. There's a lot of stuff in here. When I go into resources, you'll kind of get an idea of what I'm speaking about. There are like 19,000 items in here. So like picture stimuli, there are data sheets in here. There are some classroom materials like pre-made like token boards, first then boards, things like that. What we're going to look for is the scope and sequence. So I'm just going to type in scope here on the search bar. I'm on the left-hand side, and you can see one of the hits here is our ACE scope and sequence. So if I click on that, new tab's going to open up on my browser, and this is a big PDF with our full ACE curriculum scope and sequence. So that might be a nice document to download to your desktop to refer to when you want to get an idea of the types of skills that we have lesson plans for. If you're looking at the PDF, on the first couple of pages, there is a table of contents. The nice thing about it is that if you click on one of these areas, so for example, requesting under communication, it's going to take you directly to that page in the PDF. So there are all the sub skills under requesting mandate. Okay, so that might be a nice resource to kind of have on hand as you're searching through our lesson bank, our curriculum defined lessons to fit your goals, and kind of get an idea of how your goals might be named in a different way on our ACE scope and sequence. So the next thing that we're going to cover is how to activate a lesson. Now,
Hey, Cormac, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure, of course.
Just one of the questions that came up, while we're in the resources window, I was going to bring this up, is about materials for the goals or for the lessons.
Mm-hmm.
There are some that are attached to when we did the search there, but they're fairly limited. It's just some samples. I seem to remember there's other resources that are available in this section.
Yep.
For some of the goals. Is that correct?
There is. So if we, I'm just going to clear those filters again. There's like 19,000 resources here. So we could search for some of these items. We can kind of filter down into classroom materials, and I'll be honest, I don't go in here that often, so I'm not that really great with the classroom resources app. But you can like filter down, you can search. There's also an images you can jump into. But again, you're kind of searching via keyword. And there's a lot of stimuli in there. So it might take you a while to find the specific stimuli that you're looking for. Again, what I'd recommend, not to go through all 1,124 pages here, that would take a long time. I'd recommend like reaching out to the help desk, like, hey, do you guys have any stimuli for this weather conditions lesson that I'm teaching my kiddo, for example? And I think the ES will be able to point you towards where to find specific stimuli that might be useful for you. Did that help, John?
It does. I think that some of the academic lessons, we have a couple teachers in here who have some more academic students, and they were kind of asking about more about the like if it was a worksheet kind of a task and these kind of things. If you identified a goal and it's something that might be done with worksheets, how much is in ACE? How much would we need to use from our curriculum library? That kind of stuff.
You know what? I don't know exactly how many worksheets that we have on the system related to academic goals. I've seen when I've kind of worked, been working with some clients looking for, because they're interested in academic skills. When I go into some of those academic lessons, I do see some worksheets. So I know, for example, that there is some worksheets for like math skills, like, addition, subtraction, division, things like that. How many worksheets are in there? I'm not entirely sure. I wouldn't say it's a whole year's worth of worksheets. It's going to be a sample of worksheets. So if you have those resources already on hand, I would utilize those. The academic lesson plans, do come with some stimuli, but they're not going to be as extensive as what you would get with like a published curriculum. And I always kind of usually read milestones as a good example. Like our academic students at NECC, we're supplementing those ACE lessons with other published curricula.
We'll have folks keep searching and that kind of stuff. I'm just curious because that was something that came up while we were searching today. That's all.
Okay. So the next item we're going to cover is search for, Katarina asked how to find that keyword suggestion page. So I'll jump into that right now. In your app library, at the bottom of the screen, there are two centers to help you, to assist you on how to use the system. The one I want to go into to find our keyword suggestion page is the Help Center. So it's that app with a big question mark. So when you click on that, a new tab is going to open up on your web browser, and that's going to take you to the ACE Help Center, which looks like this. So this contains step-by-step instructions, articles. In fact, Katarina has lifted a lot of our instructions from these articles to create your own Bancroft manual for all the items, all the procedures, all the things you're going to be doing on the system this summer and going into the new school year. But this is a nice resource to find how-to articles on how to do different things, including some of the stuff that we've already talked about yesterday and today. If you go into curriculum, you're going to see a ton of help articles, again, step-by-step instructions related to our curriculum, finding lessons, activating lessons, which is what we're doing next, customizing the lessons, which we're also going to cover today. But if we look at the finding lessons help articles, there's one for search lessons by keyword. If you click on that, that's the help article that has those tips for effective keyword searches using the filters. And at the bottom of this help article, you'll see a link to that keyword suggestions PDF. So that's where you will find that. If you click on that link, it will download to your browser. There it is down there on my browser. If I click on it, there's that keyword suggestions document. And then I can, through my web browser, I could download this onto my device, or I could print it off. Okay. Okay, let's talk about how we activate a lesson. Okay, so I'm gonna go back into the curriculum app. I'm gonna go into the bank because I'm not really sure what lesson I want to activate. So I'm just gonna go to search up here using the hot links. That search is gonna take me into the lesson bank. Searching via keyword, and I am going to activate a nice easy one. Okay, I'm going to do this one here. Lesson 11, indicate name pictures. So you can follow along with what I'm doing with one of the lessons that you found during our breakout room activity. Okay, I told you to keep I recommended to take a note of the ID number. Go ahead and type that in the keyword bar over here to find that lesson plan that you find for one of your students. Again, make sure you're on the right student profile. We don't want to activate the lesson to the wrong learner. We can fix that, but we don't want to, we want to save ourselves some work. So I want to activate this lesson plan here, indicate name pictures for my training student, Cormac Jr. I've already selected it. I'm going to go ahead and hit that action button. Okay. With the action button, we already talked about print selection. That gives us a view of the lesson plan. Okay. Print list prints a list of all the lessons from my search. I don't want to do that right now because I'm looking at the whole bank. Activate is what we're going to do. Okay, but before I do that, I want to talk about generate data sheet, because some of you were looking at generate data sheet in your breakout rooms. Generate data sheet is going to give you a default lesson plan data sheet. Okay, so a data sheet related to how the lesson plan looks in the bank. Again, it's not a activated lesson data sheet, so you're not going to be able to modify it or save it. But it might be useful. The reason why it's there is because you might want to print off a data sheet to maybe baseline this lesson before you activate it, right? Maybe you need to gather some baseline data for in preparation for the IEP, okay, for current performance levels on this skill that you might want to target in the upcoming academic or IEP year. So that's where the generate data sheet is. So I have a lesson selected. If I hit generate data sheet, it's going to ask me to select a sub-level. This is an essay lesson, so we have sub-levels. I'm going to go ahead and select sub-level 1.01. When I click submit, new tab opens up. Again, this is a data sheet that is specific for indicate name pictures, the way it looks in the default settings for this lesson plan in the bank. Okay. The only option I have here is to print this data sheet off. Again, I might do that because I want to get some current performance levels before I activate the lesson. Maybe I want to test to see if the student has the skill or not, and I want to have a data sheet to help dictate my data collection on whether or not the student has this skill or not. Maybe I just want to try this lesson plan out. Okay, see if it's going to make sense for my direct care staff to utilize to teach this skill. This data sheet, like I said, is specific to indicate name picture. So I have the instructions from the lesson plan listed here. Teacher behavior, the student behavior, the suggested prompt type and fading procedure, what to do when the student responds correctly or incorrectly, the criteria for prompt fading. This is a data sheet for sub-level 1.01. The targets for sub-level 1.01 are listed in this green bar in the middle of the data sheet. So chips, cracker, candy. This lesson is teaching the student to indicate name pictures. So these are going to be picture stimuli of chips, cracker, candy. And then below we have our 3 data blocks. Okay. Now a question came up from one of the breakout rooms because they were eager beavers and looking at the data sheets. So here is a data block for this particular lesson plan. So date, setting, teacher, prompt. Obviously, that is pretty self-explanatory what the staff member would be writing in here. The session abbreviations. BL stands for baseline. TR stands for training, MT stands for maintenance, and then PR stands for probe. A probe session could be utilized for in lots of different ways. A probe session is basically running baseline again, but a probe session is something that you might do after you've done some teaching. Okay, so I might run a probe session after 2 teaching sessions with this lesson because I suspect the student might have acquired the skill pretty quickly, and I don't have to go through the whole prompt fitting procedure. Okay, I want to run a probe session to test whether the student had the skill, has the skill or not. Okay, maybe the day that I ran baseline was an off day. The student was sick, the student wasn't feeling well, the student wasn't motivated, the student was distracted. It wasn't really a good reflection of whether the student had the skill or not. So I might run a probe session after I run a teaching session because I'm like, I think Billy has this skill, right? That might be a situation where I run a probe session. I might run a probe session after an extended absence. Okay, maybe the student was at a 2-second delay prompt right before the holidays and then was off school for 2 weeks. And when they come back, I might want to run a probe session to see where the student is. Maybe the student has regressed a little bit. Maybe the student acquired the skill during the holidays because they're working on that skill with mom and dad at home or with some evening services or weekend services they receive. Probe session might be utilized in the context of speech and language or OT. So speech and language, OT, clinicians here on the call, you might activate some lesson plans for your goals in the IEP. And the expectation is that the direct care staff work on those goals, work on those lesson plans during the week. Then you might have your weekly or bi-weekly speech or OT sessions. When you're in those sessions with the student, you might want to run a probe session versus a teaching session because you're going to assess the skill differently from the direct care staff, given your skill set as a speech and language pathologist or a occupational therapist, right? So you might run a probe session to assess a student's performance on that skill versus a teaching session. So that might be another situation where you might consider running a probe session versus a training session, maintenance, or baseline session. I do have a question from Rebecca's profile. So I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hi, Carmack.
Hi.
Hi, this is Kristen. So we're looking at the prompts, and we've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years going over how we should be recording prompts, like, you know, like partial prompting, full prompting, things like that. And it doesn't look like that's how your data sheets are set up. Is there a way for us to modify the data sheets to record the prompts the way that we've been doing it? Or are we going to have to kind of rethink how we record the prompting to match the data sheets?
Yes, you can modify the data sheet to specify how you like to collect data. This data sheet that you're looking at is utilizing a errorless teaching strategy where we are going to go from the most restrictive prompt, which is the immediate gestural prompt for this lesson, for this data sheet right now. You can see that right there. So I'm going to run a series of teaching sessions at that prompt step where I'm going to be immediately prompting the student to select the right picture, because that's what this lesson plan is. And then the next teaching session, I'm going to do a 2-second delay. So the data that I'm collecting is either going to be the student engaged in a correct response, a plus, a prompted response, plus P because I pointed before they responded, an incorrect response, minus, or an incorrect prompted response, I pointed and they pointed to the wrong picture, okay? That's why the data collection for this lesson plan is specified thusly. What you're describing in terms of partial prompts, full prompts, things like that, that sounds like a situation in which you're using least to most prompting, right? So you're going to be, or graduated guidance, or within session prompting, okay? So if you were selecting one of those prompt strategies, you might change how you're setting up your data sheet, your data blocks, because you're going to be collecting data in a different way. For least to most, that's where I would be writing in your FV for a full verbal prompt, or your PV for a partial verbal prompt, or your LT for a light touch physical prompt, etc., etc. That's going to be specified on the lesson plan when you change, when you select a specific prompt type, physical prompt, verbal prompt, gesture, etc., and the type of prompt feeding procedure that you're utilizing. Okay, we're going to be looking at that once we get into the editing page. You're going to see how we can change the lesson plan to reflect different ways to collect data. Typically, when you're running an essay lesson plan and you're teaching across sessions, typically you're taking plus P, plus, minus, minus P data. Least to most, you do have the option for the FV, PV, those codes for different variations of the prompt. You're going to see that more with your incidental teaching lessons. But again, we'll see what that looks like once we get into the editing page. Did that help, Kristen?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Perfect. So that's your data sheet. And again, just to clarify, this is a generic data sheet. I'm going to print this off to kind of try the lesson out. Okay. When I activate the lesson, when I set up the lesson in the way that I want the lesson set up, this data sheet is going to change. It's not going to look like this. It's going to look different. There's going to be different information regarding the prompt type, prompt feeding procedure. The data block might look different, to Christian's point on how I might want to set up the data collection procedure. Okay. All right. So we've got our lesson selected. We hit our action button. We're going to go ahead and hit activate. Okay. When we hit activate, we have two options in the drop down. We can activate a lesson or we can activate and edit. Okay. We're going to go activate right now because then I'm going to put you guys back in the breakout rooms to activate your lessons, and then we're going to come back and do editing. Okay. The breakout room, I only want to spend like 5 minutes activating your lesson. Okay. And then we'll come back and we'll go through editing. We'll spend a good chunk of time talking about editing the lessons. Okay. So I'm going to hit activate, submit. When I hit activate or activate and edit, doesn't matter which one I select. Once I hit that submit button, this window is going to pop up on my screen. The first thing it's going to ask me is what lesson settings I want to apply to this lesson, because what I'm doing, I'm making a student copy of this lesson plan. Okay. I'm making a copy of the assessment plan for my student right now. Okay. So this is going to be Cormac Jr.'s version of lesson 11 from the bank. Okay. With that in mind, I might not want to use the default lesson settings. I might want to use the learner profile setting that we discussed yesterday. Okay. Cormac Jr. specific generalization criteria, Cormac Jr. specific prompt feeding procedure, criteria for prompt feeding, all of that good stuff. I want to apply all those settings to my lesson plan. That's going to help save me some time when I'm setting this lesson plan up for him. Okay, so I'm going to click learner profile settings. Okay, to apply that learner profile that we worked on yesterday to this lesson that I'm activating today. Next, it's going to ask me to select the service plan year. Cormac Jr. is still in his 2020-2021 service plan year. Okay, if I'm setting this up for the next service plan year, that's okay. I can do that. Okay, you have a big drop down there. If you're activating a lesson plan that's not part of a service plan, okay, it's kind of a side skill that you're working on, you can select NA. That's an option. The third thing you're going to set up here, and this was a topic of conversation in some of the breakout rooms that I jumped into. This lesson might fit everything that I want to accomplish, but I don't like the name because we did not call this indicate name pictures on the IEP. This was not the name of the goal. Maybe we called it something different. Maybe we called it picture indication. That's what we call the goal on the IEP for Cormac Jr. I can change the name of the lesson, okay? So some of you who are finding lesson plans to fit specific goals that had a very different name, this is where you can change the name of that lesson that you're activating. The last thing we're going to type in here is an objective number. Okay, you can leave the objective number at 0.00. The objective number is a nice way just to organize the lessons in a list, going from lesson 1 to lesson 25, 30, 100, 150, whatever, okay? At NECC in Massachusetts, we have our numbered section on the IEP. Then we have our objectives, our goals within each section. So area 1 on the IEP might be the discrimination area, and then we have objectives 1.01, 1.02, 1.03. So we're going to align our objective number for our ACE lessons to the objective number on the IEP. So if picture indication was objective 1.2 on my IEP, I'm going to type in 1.2 here. Okay, and keep that consistent. That's going to make it easier when I'm running my reports at progress reporting time, okay, for my goals, for the data that I've collected. Okay. After I have all that information in, I'm going to click the activate button. It's going to do some thinking. It's going to be activating the lesson for me. At some point, I'm going to see a message on the screen telling me the lesson is activated. There it is. So that lesson is now activated. Okay. And you'll notice I find this lesson through the bank. Okay. Lesson 11, the status was blank before, now it says active. Okay, this lesson is now active for Cormac Jr. Okay, so I'm going to put you guys back into your breakout rooms. It's 2:05. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to activate a couple of lessons that you found in the previous breakout room activity. Okay, and I only want you to activate the lesson. So don't hit activate and edit, just hit the activate button. Okay, so select your lesson, hit the action button, hit activate. Activate selected, hit that submit button, fill out the information that's going to appear in this window. Okay, when we get back, I'm going to show you how to find your activated lessons, and then we're going to go into the editing page. Okay, so your breakout rooms are open, and I can pop in and answer questions. I want to keep this as a 5-minute activity so we can get into the editing process. You all hopefully were able to activate some lesson plans. Now we want to find our students' active lessons. So I didn't leave the page I was on before. There's a couple of ways we can get to our students' active lessons. I'm already in the curriculum app, right? Because we've been in the curriculum app all day searching for lessons. You'll notice on our quick links here, right now I'm in search, searching via keyword. Fourth option here is our learners' lessons. That's how we can get to our students' active lessons. So if I click on learners lessons, that's going to take me to our list of students' active lessons. So Cormac Jr. has 31 active lessons right now. On your end, when you get to this page, depending on how many lessons you've activated, you will see those lessons listed here. Okay, it's probably going to be a small number because you guys are just getting started getting things set up for your learners. Okay, before we talk about the active lessons, I want to show you 2 other ways to get there. Okay. So I'm going to navigate back to the curriculum dashboard. which I didn't really talk about. We just talked about finding lessons on this page, but right beside find lessons, you can see view lessons, okay? And you can see Cormac Junior has 31 active lessons, 2 in archive. Click on that big tick. It's another way to get to the students' active lessons, okay? So that's 2 ways we can get to the students' active lessons. There is a third way to get to the students' active lessons. At the top of your screen, this is a navigation tip. At the top of your screen, beside your user profile button that we talked about yesterday, there is a button to the left of that with 3 horizontal lines and dots. That opens up your general navigation menu. So if I were to click on that, this window is going to appear on the screen, listing all the apps I have access to on my account. I'm going to go into curriculum. Search learner lessons will take me to my students' active lessons. Okay, it's another way to navigate around the website. Browse lessons will take us to searching via scope and sequence, which we covered first. Search lessons takes us to the lesson bank where we're searching via keyword. Okay, a couple of different ways to navigate around. John, your group has some questions.
Yeah, I'm gonna have them ask themselves. Leanne, you want to go first? Just unmute yourself.
Hello?
Hi.
Did it work?
Yep.
Okay. What if when I activated one of my students under one name, I feel like it went to another student, but it didn't say active under the other name. I saw active for one name, but then I did it for another student and it popped up red.
Which student? Which classroom are you in, Brianna?
Which class?
B108.
B108. And which student did you activate a lesson to?
They're both under Kaylee.
2 lessons you activated.
Two.
Yep.
But one of them, I thought I switched the name to another kid. Or how do I switch it?
How do you? Oh, so you activated these 2 lessons for Kaylee?
One of them, the sorting the objects, it was supposed to go under Brendan.
Okay. So.
And when I went under Brendan, I don't know, I gotta read it. Hold on.
Go under Brandon. I'm gonna go to Brandon's profile. Brandon doesn't have any lessons activated. Did you switch? Did you switch over to Brandon's account before you tried to activate the second lesson?
So how can I switch over it to Brendan's?
Excellent question. That's what we're going to talk about next.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you, Leanna. But you're asking you questions, and this is something that's going to come up, and that's what I'm going to be covering now. So thank you for asking it. Are there other questions for John Script?
Will, did you want to ask? Or you good? Same question.
Same question. Okay. Let's cover that right now. Let me switch back over to my training student. Okay. So here's Cormac Junior's active lessons. Let's find the lesson that I just activated. There it is there. Where is it? There it is. Okay. Picture indication. That's a lesson that I just activated. So when you're in your students' list of active lessons, there's a number of things that you can do. Select the lesson, click your action button. Here's the list of all the things you can do with that lesson, okay? The first thing you can do is go into the editing page. We'll talk about that in a second. I want to answer John's classroom's questions regarding transferring a lesson to another learner. I can't transfer a lesson to another learner. I can copy a lesson to another learner, okay? So you'll notice the 5th option down on this list is copy to another learner. So Liana, what I would recommend doing is go to, I think you said it was, ooh, 109, was it C109? No, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot what classroom you're in. Apologies.
B108.
B108. I don't know why I thought B109. And you activated lessons for Kaylee, or there's 2 lessons activated for Kaylee. One of those lessons should be for Brandon.
Correct.
Yes? Okay. So what I would do is I would go into Kaylee's profile. Okay. Go to her active lessons, find the lesson that's supposed to go to Brandon, highlight it like I have done, select it like I have done, and then click that copy to another learner button. Okay. When you click that, this window appears. It's very similar to the one that we saw when we activated a lesson, but there's another row to specify which learner we want to copy this lesson to. Okay. So Liana, what you're going to do is you're going to go to the Bancroft account, Bancroft School, to your classroom, and you're going to select Brendan. Okay. For that lesson you want to copy over.
Okay.
And then from here, I'm going to copy this lesson to my other training student, Tom. From here, I can apply Tom's learner profile, assign Tom's service plan year, give the name, specify a specific name for Tom's goal on his IEP. We're working on the same skill. Maybe we didn't call this picture indication for Tom. We called it. If we could spell properly. Pressure, you guys are all looking. Indicate pictures. Okay. And maybe on Tom's IEP, this is objective 1.5. Okay. So this is a really nice way to copy lessons across multiple students if all your students are working on the same goals. Like I work in a classroom where everybody's working on hand washing. Okay. Instead of having to find hand washing for each individual student, I can find hand washing TA, a hand washing lesson for one student, and then copy it across all the other students using this feature. Okay. So Liana, that's what you're going to do to get that, to copy that lesson that you accidentally activated for Kaylee to Brandon. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
That's one thing. Oh, question.
One more question from our group, Cormac, about objective name change after we activated a lesson. Yes,
you can do that as well. I'm going to get into that when we cover editing the lesson and managing the lesson. Are there any other questions related to copying lessons to another learner? So here's the other cool thing about copying lessons to another learner. This is how you guys can collaborate, okay? So I'm just going to pick on people whose video I see. So Stephanie is working with a learner and she's having a hard time finding a lesson plan for hand washing. Steve might tell her like, oh, I found this awesome lesson plan for one of my students for hand washing. Stephanie, if she has access to Steve's classroom, she could go in and copy that lesson from Steve's classroom. Okay, so that's one. Maybe Stephanie wants to do that because Stephanie and Steve both work at the same school in the same building, different classrooms, but the TA, the lesson plan for hand washing on the ACE specifies grabbing a paper towel to dry your hands for the last step in the sequence in the behavior chain. But at your fancy school, you guys have automatic hand dryers, right? So Steve's already went through the work and copying or activating the lesson plan for hand washing for his student and changing the steps to specify that the student should place their hands under the automatic dry hand dryer to dry their hands. So instead of Stephanie having to do the same work, Stephanie could go in and copy the hand washing lesson that Steve set up for his student to her learner. What that means is when she copies that lesson, all the changes to the instructional plan, the steps in the behavior chain that Steve made, they're going to be copied over to Stephanie's learner. Okay, so that's another really nice, useful tool for copying lessons to another learner. If you activate lesson plans from our bank and you have to make changes, and those changes might be useful for other learners you're working with, either within your classroom or in another classroom, instead of activating the lesson plan from the bank again and then making those changes again, you could copy the lesson to another learner and then those edits will follow. Okay, another really useful way to use the copy to another learner feature. Okay. So that's copy to another learner. I'm kind of doing the sequence out of order because again, I want to go back to Liana's situation where a lesson was activated for the wrong student. Okay. So Liana, for that lesson that you've just copied over to Brandon, you don't need it for Kaylee, probably. I could be wrong, but let's say you don't. Let's work on something that you don't need that lesson for Kaylee. To delete a lesson, you're going to hit the action button and hit that big old delete button right there. Okay, that's going to delete the lesson. That lesson like disappears from the student's profile. Okay. For Katarina's group's question regarding changing the name after you've activated the lesson, if you click on Start a New Plan Year, you will see this window again. Okay. Now, to Katarina's point, you don't want to change the service plan year. You want to change the lesson name. That's how you're going to do that. So if you activate a lesson, you forgot to change the name, or you misspelled it, or there's a typo, that's how you can change the lesson name. Okay. Other things here on managing your active lessons. Change data status, turns the lesson off in Teach Now, or turns off data entry for a lesson. Maybe you want to put a lesson on hold. Click your change data status option, put the lesson on hold. Okay, I want to put the lesson on hold for a little bit. If you are utilizing paperless data entry, which again, you guys haven't seen this yet, but you can turn access that lesson off in Teach Now by clicking not visible in Teach Now. That's an option. With the action button, other ways you can manage your lesson. We talked about starting a new plan year, copying to another learner. Apply learner profile. We talked about the learner profile yesterday. If you update your learner profile and you want to apply that updated learner profile to lessons that are already activated, this is how you do it. Okay. Apply learner profile will apply the current learner profile to the lesson plan that you have selected. Okay. So if 3 months from now, I update Cormac Junior's learner profile and I want to apply that to this lesson, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm select the lesson, click the action button and click apply learner profile. Okay. With Liana, we already talked about how to delete a lesson. Above delete, we also have an archive lesson. Archive lessons are lessons that we're no longer teaching. Okay. Maybe there were lessons that were activated as part of the current IEP and they're not going to be carryover goals for the next IEP. We're going to put them in archive. Okay. Maybe we want to archive a lesson that is no longer applicable for our student. Okay, maybe we find a better version, a better way to teach the skill with a different lesson plan. So we're going to archive the lesson that we were previously using. Okay. The nice thing about archive lessons is that you can always reactivate them. You'll also have access to any data that you entered for them. Okay. I'm going to close down my action button. I'm going to refer you over to the left-hand side where the filters are. You can see that right now I have active lessons selected. I'm looking at Cormac Junior's active lessons. If I click on archived, there's the 2 lessons that I currently have in archive for him, lessons that I taught previously. Okay. If I want to reactivate an archive lessons, I can select it, click the action button, and click reactivate. Okay. You'll notice in the action button dropdown, I can also copy this archive lesson to another learner. I might be no longer teaching this lesson for Cormac Junior, but my other student might benefit from this lesson plan in the way that we set it up. Okay, so I can copy that lesson to another learner. I'm going to go back into my active lessons. That lesson picture indication that I activated for Cormac Junior. If I click delete on it, which we talked about, that will delete the lesson. I'll be asked, do I want to remove this from the lessons on the learner's lesson list? Yes, I do. That lesson is now gone. Okay. Y'all don't have any lessons that have data entered yet, but I'm going to show you what happens when I select a lesson that has data entered. Here's a lesson that I have set up for Cormac Junior, match identical objects. If I were to click the action button and click delete and click yes, I'm going to get this message on the screen. You're not allowed to delete a lesson with data in it. Okay. So Liana, you should have been able to delete the lesson that you wanted to delete for Kaylee. I'm trying to delete this lesson here for Cormac Junior. I'm not allowed to do it because I have tons of data already saved for that lesson on the system. I can archive this lesson. I cannot delete it. Okay. Other things that I can do here, I can print a list. Okay, print list will open up a new tab on your browser and it gives you a list of all the lessons you have activated for the student. Okay, the ID number, the objective number, the name of the lesson type, area, activation date, status, service plan year, all that good stuff. That can be really helpful if you need to provide that list to a supervisor, a parent, instead of having to type that list out yourself. Nice handy print button right there. Below print list is print selection. Now the print selection here is going to be different from the print selection that we looked at before, because when we have print selection from the learner's lesson list, this is the student copy of the lesson that we're printing off. So any changes we made to the lesson for this student, that's what's going to be reflected in this lesson here. okay, this lesson plan. You'll also notice that the student's name is at the top of the lesson plan. What folks tend to do is print off a program book. Okay, have all the lesson plans printed off. These are the lesson plans that you're printing off for that program book. Okay. And then the last item down here is your generate data sheet. Again, this is going to be different from the generate data sheet that we used when we were searching for lessons. These lessons are now activated. Okay, so when I hit generate data sheet, I am making a data sheet for a lesson that I have activated, that I have set up for my student. Okay, so when I hit submit, you'll see, again, like the print selection, the student's name, the IEP year, and the objective number that I've assigned to this lesson will be at the top of the data sheet. The name of the lesson, the instructions, the criteria, the targets. This is 1.01 for match identical objects. The targets are candy, chips, cracker. Your data blocks below. And then you have 4 buttons at the bottom of the screen. Add row will add another data block row to the data sheet. Okay, I just added a bunch of rows to this data sheet. Save the data sheet, we'll save the data sheet, how I've changed it. Okay. Because the other thing you can do on your generate data sheet is you can type on it. You can delete stuff, you can add text like I'm doing right now, okay? Now, the stuff you might add to the data sheet, I wouldn't recommend editing the data sheet for wholesale changes that you're making to the lesson plan. That's gonna happen in the edit page, which we're gonna cover next, okay? But this is the reason why you have that save button down at the bottom. You can add more data blocks to your data sheet. You can add in more text, maybe change the wording, okay, to make it a little bit more user-friendly in some cases for some of your instructors, okay? That's your data sheet. So that's how we're managing our active lessons. Does anyone have any questions on those tools that are listed under your action menu in this on this page? All right. Now we're going to go into the editing page. Okay, so we have a lesson selected. I have match identical object selected for my student. I'm going to hit the action button like I've done and click the edit button, and we're going to come to the edit page, which is going to look like this. Now, I'm going to jump back to activation for a second. When you're activating a lesson from the lesson bank, from scope and sequence, when you click activate, you have that drop down, activate or activate and edit. If you select activate and edit and hit submit, that little mini window will pop up as it did when we activated lessons. We're going to apply default settings or learner profile, select the service plan year, change the name of the lesson, assign an objective number. If we select activate and edit, when the lesson is activated, when we get that little blue message saying lesson successfully activated, the ACE will automatically pull us to this page. Okay. So depending on your workflow, you might decide to activate all your lessons first and then go in and edit them, or you might activate a lesson on each lesson one by one. And when you activate it, you might want to go right into the edit page and make the student specific changes that you want to make to that lesson plan. Okay. What I'm showing you here is another way to get into the editing page, which might need to happen at some point during the instructional process, because you might need to change things, right? You may need to add more targets, change the teaching plan, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So let's talk about the editing page. The first section is a section that you can't change. The lesson name, the ID number, that stuff. But we know how we can change the lesson name from the action button on the lesson on the learner's lesson list. We just reviewed that. The section that the next section that we can change is the scopes and other libraries. Now this lesson here falls under 2 different areas on our scopes and sequence alignments. Okay, one area on the ACE scope and sequence and one area on the VB map. Okay, if the scopes don't matter to you, then you don't have to do anything. Okay, you can just leave whatever selection on the ACE scope and sequence is selected here. Just leave that selected. Okay, and hit the save button. When you're working through the editing page, it's important that you're saving your work. So every time you are finished with a section, hit that save button. When you do, the next section usually pops open. So the objective area has popped open for me. Okay. This objective or this lesson has objective number 1.1. That's the number that I assigned it when I activated. I activated it for the service plan year 2020, 2021. I could change those 2 options here. The ACE lesson objective is right there in the middle of this area on the screen. And it's made up of these selections here. So this is where I can make further refinements to the objective statement. I can change the generalization criteria, the number of people the student should perform the skill across and settings. The mastery criteria, the number of consecutive sessions I want to see the student perform at that mastery criteria before I consider a skill mastered, and the number of learning targets. All those items I can change and they will be reflected in the ACE lesson objective that is that I just highlighted. Okay. Now, one thing to note that I didn't reference when you guys were searching through through lessons, the mastery criteria of 89%, that's a little clue for how many trials we are prescribing for this discrete trial lesson. Okay. 89% equates to 8 out of 9 correct in a 9 trial data block. Okay, so that's where that 89% is coming from. We're allowing the student to make 1 error. If you see a performance criteria of 90%, that's cluing you in that this lesson plan is going to utilize a 10 trial data block. If you see 80%, 5 trial data block. Okay, we're allowing for 1 error. 4 to 5, 80%, that's where that's coming from. Okay. But you can change this mastery criteria, and I would recommend you do that if you are going to use a different data block from the one that we're suggesting from this lesson plan. We're going to show you how to change the data block selections in a second. Okay. The lesson objective that I have highlighted right here, is this how you're writing IEP objectives at Bancroft? If it's not, if you're writing your objective statements in a different way, you can use our learner objective open text box right here. So you can copy and paste the objective statement that you wrote on the IEP into the learner objective here. That means that when you print this data or this lesson plan off, your learner objective will appear on the lesson plan, not the ACE lesson objective. However, the ACE cannot read your learner objective. So if I wrote my learner objective like this for this lesson, let's say I wrote a objective statement like that. The ACE cannot tell what mastery criteria to pull from that lesson objective that I just typed in. Okay. The mastery criteria that it's going to pull, that it's going to use to decide when targets are mastered and report, have that information reflect on your reports, is going to come from your ACE lesson objective. Okay. So if you utilize the learner objective, that's great. You can. That's why it's there. You want to make sure that your ACE lesson objective is set up in a way that makes sense. Okay. What happens sometimes is we get help desk tickets from folks saying, like, I don't know why these targets, the ACE is not moving these targets into mastery. The student is performing 100% correct and independent. And then we go in and look at the lesson. It's because the ACE lesson objective says that it must be taught across 3 people. And when we look at their data, only 2 people are running sessions. Or it needs to be, the student needs to perform at that high performance level across 2 different settings. And the data that's been entered only across 1 setting. Okay. So pay attention to your ACE lesson objective. Make sure that you're setting it up in a way that makes sense for when you want to determine when targets are mastered within your lesson plan. Okay. Again, once we finish editing a section on our edit page, we're going to hit that save button. Next area opens up. Next area is your instructions section. This came up, parts of this area came up in our discussion on the learner profile yesterday. One person commented in a breakout room that they would do a different correction procedure. That's great. This is where you can specify your own individualized correction procedure for your student, for your learner for this lesson. Okay. The lesson materials first, you can add more information to this. You can specify, hey, the materials are going to be kept in the top drawer of Cormac's desk. Okay. You can add more information on the lesson materials. Reinforcement is a drop down. You'll see some of the options that we saw yesterday with a learner profile. There's a 4th option, which is other. If you select that, you can type in your own reinforcement procedure. I want to deliver reinforcer for correct responses on a VR3 schedule. Okay, you can type in your own reinforcement procedure. For corrective procedure, same thing. You have the drop-down options that we saw yesterday. If you select other, you can type in your own error correction procedure. Okay. Again, we're going to hit save. Next area that opens up is the procedure section. This is a lesson plan with only one level. You can change the name of the skill that is being taught at each level if you want to. Teacher behavior and learner behavior are already in there, but you can add in more additional instructions for the teacher behavior, more additional instructions for the learner behavior. You can see that I added in additional instructions for this lesson for my learner. The learner behavior that is specified in the ACE lesson says that the learner must point. Okay, for Cormac Jr., we will allow him to indicate the correct object without an isolated finger. Okay, so you can add in additional information. For the prompt selection, the prompts that are going to be listed in your dropdown are going to be prompts that we think will work best with the skill that you're trying to teach. So this skill is a physical response. The student is indicating the correct object in an array based on a sample that I'm going to be presenting. So it's a physical response. That's why it makes sense that a physical prompt is an option here, or a gestural prompt, okay? But if I want to use a different prompt type that's not listed here, I can click Add New Prompt Type, and we have some other options, okay? Combinations of different prompts. I could deselect some of these prompt options, okay? That's how I can add more prompt options to the list that I have here, okay? The prompt that you should match in some way the response that you're trying to teach. Beside your prompt selection, you have your prompt fading procedure. Right now, I have time delay selected here, so you can see the prompt steps I would utilize for this time delay prompt fading procedure, going from an immediate gestural prompt to a 2-second delay, 4-second delay, through to independence, gradually fading out that gestural prompt, that point cue prompt that I'm utilizing to teach the skill. Okay. If I don't want to use time delay, I have some other options. I could use most to least. Okay. Gesture, partial gesture, eye gaze shift through to independence, least to most. Okay. The reverse order. Within session. Okay. Going from a situation where I'm prompting all responses to prompting 7 responses, 5 responses, 3 responses, 1 response. There are other prompt fitting options. It depends on the lesson that you're looking at. This lesson with this prompt selection, these are my only options. Okay. If I were to select physical and click Add New Prompting Fading option, I have some additional options. I could use graduated guidance with physical prompting, least to most APE, but that's more applicable to APE related skills. Okay. Below your prompt selection, you have your data block selection. This is always going to give you a suggested data block selection. For this lesson, it makes sense for us to utilize a 9-trial 3-stem array data block. Okay. If you click the little plus, it'll show you what the data block looks like. I'm going to zoom in so you can see it. So we're using a 3-stem array. We have a sample for each trial. We are using a 9-trial data block, and the data block is going to dictate to the instructor how they are arranging the stimuli in front of the student in the array and what sample they should be presenting across each of the 9 trials. Okay. If I don't want to use that data block, I can change it. Okay. I can click Add New Data Block. I can make different selections. Okay. Different basic data blocks. Okay, 5-trial, 10-trial, 12-trial, programmed opportunity, summary data. Different arrays with different stimuli presented. So if I want to decrease it to a 2-stem array, I can change that, or increase to a 4-stem array, I can change that. No array, which doesn't really make sense for this particular skill. And then there's also some really specified discrimination data blocks, which I'm not going to utilize for this lesson plan. They're more specific to teaching simple discrimination skills. Okay. Again, worked on a section, we're going to hit that save button. Next area is your instructional plan. Okay, that's your teaching targets. Okay, so you're going to click, it's the only area that doesn't automatically open up for you on the edit page. So we're going to click the edit button here. And now that opens up. So here are your targets. For these targets, for each set of targets, I have a number of icons. I have a red trash can for 1.01, a blue scratch pad, a little tick, and a cell phone. The trash can enables me to delete these targets. Okay. Now the red trash can is not appearing for the other sets of targets in my list. This is a lesson plan for which I've already entered data, and the data that I've entered are for targets 1.02, 1.03, 1.04, and so forth. I'm not allowed to delete targets that I've already entered data for. On your end, if you're following along with the lesson that you just activated, you will see the red trash can for all your targets. Okay. 1.01, I have no data entered yet, so I could delete these targets if I wanted to. Okay. The blue little notepad and pencil enables me to edit these targets. That's where I can go in and change these targets. I don't want to do candy chips cracker. I want to use different targets. I want to do banana, apple, orange. Okay. Could change the instructions, change the response. The green tick enables me to continue or discontinue data collection. Okay. That might be advantageous in a situation where you've introduced a set of targets that you don't want to teach anymore. Maybe they're not applicable anymore for that student. I'm thinking things like, sorry, I just got a message through the chat.
Didn't mean to stop you mid-thought there, Cormac. You got distracted real easily.
I did. Guys, I know it's last thing on a Friday at the end of a long week. There's a lot of content to sit through. I'm just going to finish this editing page and then we'll end. Everyone's suddenly talking and really excited. Okay. So that's how we're going to change our targets. I'll reference the cell phone in our next training. Again, hitting that save button. Criteria is where I can change the criteria for prompt fading. Okay. Turn my lesson alerts on or off. Mine's already turned on because I applied the learner profile to this lesson for the student. The assessment section is not something that I can change, but I can change the maintenance section, change the schedule for maintenance sessions for master targets, what to do for reinforcement, and the criteria for reteaching. The criteria section is going to be really important because that's when the ACE is going to move targets from mastery back into reteaching if the student starts to make lots of errors. So bear that in mind, and that comes up in all your reports. Once we're finished with editing the lesson plan, we'll click the close button. This lesson plan is now all set to go with the edits that we've made. We're going to be pulled back right to the learner's active lessons. Okay. Guys, I appreciate you working through everything today for over 2.5 hours and listening to me drone on and on. I really like the model of using the breakout rooms to cover some of these tasks as we went through them. I hope this was productive to help you get started in finding lesson plans for your student goals. And you now know how to activate those lessons that you're going to find and start the editing process. I'll be happy to answer some editing questions when we have our next session next week. It is only an hour session next Thursday, and we do have other topics that we need to cover. But in the meantime, you guys know how to access the ACE Help Desk. If you have any questions, please utilize them to help explain some of our lesson plans, help you find lesson plans, help problem solve any issues that come up. You can also reach out to me, and some folks have been doing that over the last 2 days with logins and getting access to the system. So I appreciate you reaching out when you need help. That's everything I have for today. We are finishing 15 minutes early. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Friday and your weekend. I am out on vacation next week, Monday through Wednesday, but I will answer any questions you guys have via email on Thursday. In the meantime, recommend reaching out to the help desk if there are questions that you have that you were going to direct towards me. The help desk are going to be well placed to help you with the questions that you might have. All right, thanks everybody.
Thanks.
Again, enjoy the rest of your Friday, enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you guys next Thursday.
Great, thanks, Cormac. Great job. It was great. You just caught us at the end of